So, everybody, today is Sunday afternoon in Thailand, and it's also Sunday morning in the UK. It's actually morning time in Europe. It's, in fact, church time. This is the time to go to church. And I'm glad to see you guys didn't. And you're out here hanging out here. So, let's start with some easy questions that have easy answers to them, and let's do a lot of those. The first one will go back to Ivan. Ivan was confused about the difference between laziness and dullness. And dullness actually is when you're walking around or sitting like a zombie, running into things. When you're walking around, you're running into the walls, you're running into furniture, you're running into traffic. And laziness is when you're alert enough to not walk into stuff, including unwholesome thoughts. And when you are really, really alert enough to be really, really lazy, you don't run into anything, not even thoughts. You're just sitting there hanging out. David, I didn't hear an answer to your question. You're at Wat Suan Mok now?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, just got here maybe 4 days ago. Apparently tomorrow is Buddhadasa's birthday. They're supposed to be.
Oh, there's going to be a crowd, I bet.
They're already coming in. Yeah.
Yeah. Bhikkhu Buddhadasa's birthday is an absolutely ordinary day.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't know that. They think there's something special about it.
They want to.
Go ahead.
They're wanting to offer things to his dead body.
Oh, wow. a sandwich, a piece of chicken, a heart pump. Okay. So we'll have to figure what that means. And you met Achan, or not Achan, but Pramarut.
Yeah, the second time I met him here. Yeah, he gave us a tour of the spiritual theater again.
Great.
Yeah.
Yes, Achan Pramarut, brother, is a good friend of mine. I make the distinction between Pramarut and Achan Marut because Achan requires 10 years, and I think he's going on 4 years now. Is that correct?
To be honest, I'm not sure, but I do know he's kind of a new monk. I don't know how many years though. Yeah.
Somewhere between 4 and 6, somewhere between 2018 and 2020 is when he ordained. I think it was in fact 6 years. So, just a point of interest, Pramarut actually was quite famous in the West. He was a major contributor to some sort of world help kind of thing. And he retired and came back to Thailand. He was actually in the United States. And he came back to Thailand with very good English. And he ordained at about the age of 70 or so at Wat Suan Mok. And so, in fact, what I'm hearing from you is when you ask him about Wat Suan Mok, his answer was, everybody is welcome. So, Daniel, do you hear that? Right, everybody is welcome at Wat Suan Mok. And where are you staying now, David? You're staying in the dormitory?
Yeah, currently just staying in the men's dormitory. Yeah. By the Dhamma hall, next to the Dhamma hall.
Is that the old Dhamma hall where they have the piece of World War II artillery shell cut into a bell?
Oh, they have that very old bell, yes.
Yeah, that's a piece of World War II artillery that they cut the good part out and use the tail for a bell.
Oh, I have to take a closer look at that.
Okay, and it's
It,
also the place where they have one of the big tankas of Paticca.
mm-hmm.
And they also have three statues, a man, a woman, and an infant. They're not statues, they're skeletons, actual real skeletons. Is that right? That's the right place?
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Hmm.
Yeah, real skeletons.
The story is that the woman was actually a celebrity in Thailand. She was I think either a fashion model or an actress, and she got sick with something or another, and she donated everything to Wat Suan Mok, and bones is about all that's left. It's a very old story, by the way. So, Thomas, you got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, so my question is there such a thing as too much effort when creating wholesome thoughts?
Absolutely. Wow. In fact, too much effort is the way that is commonly done. Working too hard. Right noble effort, in fact, the definition of right noble effort is the least amount of work possible to actually get the job done. All right? And way too much effort is always spent when we're not getting the job done, but we keep at it. And in fact, that's the Mahasi method, is let's work too hard for too long and not get anything out of it. Why is that? Because they work hard at noting, making sure that they're noting things correctly, but they're not taking the right effort to actually make a change. And what is the change to be made? All of those unwholesome thoughts that they're noting, they make a change and change that into a wholesome thought. And so too much effort means that you're not actually creating wholesome thoughts, because once you are now having a wholesome thought, the job that needed to be done has been done. Lunchtime whistle is blowing, folks. Let's take a break. So, Amrit, you repeat your question.
Yes, my question is, how would you define liberation?
I would define liberation. In fact, let me give a line from a song. Freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose. In fact, David, I tried that one on Dhammarato, and he really loved it. Freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. Why, Amrit? Is because you've already lost everything. Now, what will happen is that when you start having wholesome thoughts, you just drop everything. But then we'll pick up a bauble. We'll pick up an old argument. We'll pick up an old stupid thing we've done. And we carry that around for a while. But when we lose it, throw it out. Now we've got freedom because we got nothing left to lose again. Okay, so there, in fact, as I said, there's two kinds of freedom. For the ordinary person, freedom is something that they don't have, but they can practice and get it momentarily. And then they can practice again and get it momentarily. That's when the right to noble effort is actually an effort. But when you continue to do that unremittingly, that right noble effort turns into energy that you just pop into it. Okay.
May I ask a question that fits in nicely with this? Or
Daniel, yes, go ahead.
yeah. Step 12 of Anapanasati is to liberate the mind.
Yes.
How is that different from the fourth tetrad? So the Vipassana tetrad of Anapanasati.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So
I know that you use the word step. Let's say item number 12.
Right.
And in fact, in the sutta, they're not listed by number. That numbering system is not there. It's just items. Okay? Right. Bullet points that are not competing with each other, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, so liberating the mind means now that you have liberated it from all of the unwholesome thoughts. And when the mind is liberated, it then can become unified. Or as another way of looking at it, item 11 and item 12 are interrelated in the sense that when the mind is liberated, it's unified. And when the mind is unified, it's liberated. Now that can be momentarily, it can last all afternoon, or when you're dead, it's long term.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that in fact you're talking about the section called Chitta Nupassana or Sita Nupassana, depending upon how you spell or pronounce the word, and that an important point about Chitta versus Dhamma Nupassana is that the Chitta Nupassana, that is referring to the old reptilian part of the brain. That in fact the higher mind is Manu. Coming from the word man. Okay, so the Chitta Nupassana is actually a more primitive part of the brain. And that's the part that needs to be both liberated and also unified, and it's actually unifying then with higher part of the brain rather than fighting against it. Okay, so when we stop fighting with ourselves, arguing with ourselves about the distinction between how things should be and how we want them to be and why both of those are different from reality, and when we start integrating the mind into reality and forget about what it should be, forget about what we want, and just live in reality, then the mind is unified, and at the same time it's liberated from all the would, should, coulds, and wannabes. Now, Eric Berne refers to this as the parent, the adult, and the child, to where the parent ego state is all the shoulds, woulds, coulds, ought-to-bes, rules, rituals, things that are supposed to be a certain way, idealism, in fact. And the child ego state is all based in feelings. I want this, I want that, I like this, I don't like that, and it's almost always really ignorant. But if we start having wise wants, that means that we're integrating wise wants with reality. And as we're integrating the parent ego state, the parent ego state is no longer interested in how things ought to be, but much more interested in, wow, look at how things really are. Okay? So that's the chitta part of the mind that becomes liberated.
It's the chitta part.
Huh?
So it's a limited liberation, you would say then.
Yes.
Right.
So because we're likely in the beginning part of the practice and in the middle part of the practice to slide back into wanting things that we don't have, which is the same thing as sliding back into being dissatisfied by wanting things that we don't have. But as you develop, you can catch that quickly. Here's an example. Amrit, this one's for you. Imagine a jack-in-the-box, you know, the one that you turn the crank and it plays a little tune about, what's the jack-in-the-box tune? Something da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Then all of a sudden, pop goes the weasel, right? And then the jack comes flying out of the box. In the beginning, when we turn the crank, the lid will open, but there's no energy in that jack, and so we have to go into the little box and pull jack out. But after we keep practicing, we get to, instead of right noble effort to pull Jack out of the box, to pull our wholesome thoughts together, they will pop out. All we have to do is to remember to look, and bang goes that right effort. It's no longer right effort, it's energy now. It's not just effortless, it actually explodes. It just goes boom. And that can be with a long, deep breath. You don't even have to think about having a long, deep breath. It's already coming. You don't have to think about throwing that unwholesome thought out. You've already thrown it out with, I see that. Okay, so this is the development. So liberation is that way. There is a liberation of grabbing hold of that Jack and pulling him out of the box, which is the same thing as taking the right noble effort to change that unwholesome thought that's so stuck in there that we actually have to pull it out from the unwholesome into the wholesome. But we keep doing that, and pretty soon it gets all lubricated up, and there's the energy going, and you turn that crank, and Jack just pops right out of the box.
And
That's
what
Go ahead.
So I was reading a book by Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, or someone that compiled the speech, and I saw that step 7 is like the mind conditioner. So how the piti and the sukha conditions our mind. So is that then what pulls us out of the first jhana?
All right. Okay, so now you're talking about item 6 and 7.
Right.
Okay, item 6 and 7 in the Anapanasati Sutta is basically to see the mental conditioners and then release the mental conditioners. What that actually means is not just, and by the way, this is in the Vedana part. It shows how our feelings are interrelated with our mental state, and our mental state is interrelated with our feelings. But there's more to it than that, and that is that the body is interrelated with those feelings, and the mind is interrelated with the body. So this is what they mean by that interrelationship, to see those connections, to see that the mood that you're in will affect the thoughts that you have, and it affects the thoughts in the way that you feel. So if you're in a foul mood, you don't, with the mental state, if you're in a foul mood, then you are in pain in the feelings. And not only that, but you're moping around with unwholesome thoughts. But if you've got the attitude of being a winner, then the feelings are going to go along with that, and so are the thoughts. This is why we talk about it as interrelated. And when we can see then how interrelated they are, that's where things become, let us say, the freedom becomes that we release that. In other words, you can stump your toe, and that bodily sensation for most ordinary people, they don't like stumping their toe, and they'll start into a foul mood about stumping their toe. But when we're when we have that, let us say, interconnection more wisely happening, then you can stump your toe and laugh.
I found it interesting that it specifically mentioned how sukha and piti affect the mind and cause us to like cling to what caused us to get the piti and the sukha in the first place. So because personally I have some difficulty with seeing that. Do you have like specific tips?
All right. The way that you're going to get yourself into the state of sukha is by basically gladdening the mind. And how do we gladden the mind? Is by talking ourselves into gladdening the mind. Okay, so we talk ourselves into gladdening the mind, we gladden the mind, and then we begin to feel better. We feel the sukha. If we keep doing that over and over and over again, we begin to get a confidence built up, and that confidence then comes into not just pleasant feelings of satisfaction, but it graduates into success. The pity is actually a wow factor. Wow, this is great. Wow, this is paradise. The sukha is, yeah, this is paradise. But then the pity is, wow, this is paradise. And that wow factor doesn't last so long, but it does keep coming up. When the sukha is there, the pity will come and burst. And so the right way to do it is to come out of the low class stuff that we're always in into sukha, back down, and then we start to having sukha, and then we'll occasionally go into piti, and then piti, and we don't come back down to the so often back into the ordinary unwholesome life and unwholesome thoughts and unwholesome feelings and unwholesome attitudes. All right, who's next?
Thank you.
There's a guy called Truth Patty.
Hey,
Hi,
what's up?
welcome.
So a big question for me I've been having lately is I've been wanting to join a Buddhist temple as a monk, but both of my parents are hardcore Christians, like the type that think that you'll go to hell if you don't believe in Jesus. And I just want to know like what the right action is here. If I join, it'll make them very depressed, and if I don't, then I'm not going to really progress how I feel like I need to, I think.
All right. So when they talk about hell, you can say, yeah, man, I'm in hell. Thanks for pointing it out. Yeah, I'm going to go to hell if I go to that temple. Wow. Thanks, Mom. I appreciate your encouragement. In other words, you turn her upside down in her attitude, because her attitude is that hell is a waunchy place. Guess what? Hell is what we make of things. She's the one who is making the hell. Now, most of the Christians are taught that hell is someplace that you go after you're dead, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in fact, hell is a thing that the Catholic and the Protestant churches put their people in before they're dead.
But I guess my main question is, I know for sure it would depress them a lot if I made this decision to join a Buddhist temple, but I know it would be really good for me. So with knowing that it would depress them a lot, do you think that I should still go through with it?
All right, let me ask you this question. Where are you located?
Louisiana.
Louisiana. Okay, all right. This circuit court, I know that. Yes, there's a lot of hell in Louisiana.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of hell in Oklahoma, too. So, there are temples in Louisiana. There's several I know of. In fact, I forgot the name of the town that they're in. It starts with the letter I. There's a Lao-Wat there. But in fact, I think that if you look in our database, there's a lot of places that you'll find that's close by. So what I would recommend, instead of doing all or nothing, I would recommend that you find a place that's close by and start visiting it often, whether your mom knows that you're going there or not. And so you can begin to see what you're getting into.
Well, I have for the past year or two, so I'm pretty well familiar with how it all runs and everything. But
so where have you been going?
In Baton Rouge, Tambao Temple, and another one that's like Blue Lotus or something. And today I'm about to go to Magnolia Grove in Mississippi, which is Thich Nhat Hanh's temple.
Okay, all right. So go and visit and fit in and stay a while and then come back and let your mom see that you're adding busted gut, and then go again. Now, I'll tell you what, as a side point, I had a conversation with my mother that lasted more than 25 years on this very topic. It started when I was in high school, because she knows that she'd lost me in the church when I was a teenager. But later, when I was a monk in North Carolina, staying at the various Watts, especially Watt Greensboro, that my mom, when she would go to the temple on those days, she was considered the highest of the matrions. She was the mother of the monk. Nobody else had all of the old ladies didn't have a son as a monk. And so she was especially awarded high status. They always would bring a fancy chair and sit her right in front and dote over her. The Cambodians did that, and so did the Laotian people. And she ate that stuff up. So she actually started to come to the temple on a regular basis. She liked it. Another point is that she began to see then that the Buddhist monks had a very, very high quality standard of morality. I use the word morality because that would have been her word, and probably your mother's word. And my mother actually commented on several occasions that the status and the quality of the morality of the Buddhist monks is so far superior to your average Joe Blow Christian preacher that she began to become disappointed in Christianity. Now, she was really, really gung-ho when I was a little kid. All through the high school time, she was really disappointed. You've heard the story about every time that the church door opens that the whole family is there to join. My mom was the kind of person that she's the one who had the key to the church. And so when we went to church, we were there to open the door. So my mom was really, really dedicated. In fact, the last church that she had been going to, she was actually the treasurer of the church. And that's when she, as treasurer of the church, began to see how corrupt Christianity is. So that is a kind of a, let us say, a future event or a kind of a promise that I'll give you, that your mom is malleable over time. So don't worry about her, but be joyful every time you're around her.
Mm-hmm.
Be joyful. When she says, oh, you go to that Buddhist crap, you're going to go to hell. And you can say, hey, Mom, I've been to hell, and wow, it's a really nice thing. Start turning her belief systems upside down. Tell her, why don't you come to the temple too? You'll get a whole lot out of it. I mean, you don't know anything about it other than what you've heard, and all you've heard is a bunch of crap from the Christians.
Mm.
Why do the Christians talk a bunch of crap about the Buddhists? It's because the Christians are full of crap, and that's all they know how to do is talk about other things that they're better than. I mean, the Christians, aren't they the ones who were the most racist?
Yeah.
Yeah, in Louisiana. So they're going to, your mom's going to be racist against Laotians. She's going to be racist against the Vietnamese.
Yeah.
And she's creating her own hell that way.
Yeah, I really appreciate your insight. It sounds like, you know, regardless of how they react, that this is the best decision for me to just go through with it, probably.
All right. Well, keep us up. Let us know how you're doing.
Thank you.
Fit in. If you're going to the Thich Nhat Hanh, it's going to be a little bit different because Thich Nhat Hanh appeals to Westerners. So I would suggest that you make sure that not only do you go to the Thich Nhat Hanh place that's full of Westerners, but you go to the Asian places too, so that you're all Asian all the time. There's going to be differences. And also the thing to do is to saddle up beside the most senior monk that you can find. A monk that's been a monk for more than 20 years. An old Laotian monk, a Thai monk, a Cambodian, a Vietnamese monk. Not a Westerner dude, but a real monk. And become his student. Ask him questions. Fit in with them. Follow him around. Become his driver, in fact. That's a really good idea, is to find some old monk who goes to do ceremonies around here and there, because the monks do a lot of traveling. Make yourself available with the car, and then you've got that old senior monk there in the car with you for an hour or two, all to yourself.
Okay. Definitely, I appreciate it.
All right. So, who's got another question?
Dhammarato, I have a quick one. It's just about right speech.
About what?
Right speech.
You saying right speech?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I'm just curious about, because I find this to be quite a challenge for me every time I'm in social situation. I guess it's very, basically, you know, people might talk about something, gossip, and I'm trying to restrain myself from participating. Yeah, it's just, I wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
All right. So let's talk about right speech in several different contexts. One, right speech, the very best right speech is going to be joyful, happy speech. The second kind of best right speech is going to be keep your flippin' mouth shut. If you can't be joyful, shut up. Be quiet. Put a zipper on it. Okay? And if you can't do that, then take a hike. Get really silent. Get absent. Go off into seclusion someplace so that you can get your speech again correct. All right. Now, in Buddhism, as the Buddhist religion, right speech is one of the kinds of precepts. In fact, there's several of them, but they're all listed together under Musawada, Re Ramani, Sikavadam, Samatiyami, and there's actually 4 categories of right speech. And the highest one, in the sense of wrong speech, would be to tell a deliberate lie. And when I say to tell a deliberate lie, that's different than a little white lie. We want to make a distinction there, right? A big deliberate lie is going to be like denying something that happened. Okay. Another kind of false speech would then be what we would call gossip. And the kind of gossip that I mean basically is what we refer to as malicious gossip, in the sense of talking trash about someone. Okay, if you'll remember what we've talked about earlier with Truth Polly, is that what you've got your name on? Polly. Okay, Truth Polly. Notice that I did not trash his mother. That's an important point, is you don't trash people. This is what we mean by malicious gossip.
And you think she's racist?
Pardon?
You think she's racist? Isn't that a little bit trash talking?
Well, we were talking about Louisiana being racist.
Okay, okay.
I didn't specifically talk to his mom about it, but just in
It,
general, she lives
it's
in a
true.
racist.
There's a lot of racist people.
Okay. And in another respect, they like being racist. If I'd called her racist, she says, right on. I hate those Laotians. Right on. I hate those Vietnamese. They're not Christians at all, you know? So, actually calling her racist is not even trash talk. It's actually more correct speech. But it would be a kind of a deliberate lie to say, oh, she's not racist. She couldn't possibly be racist because she's in Louisiana and there ain't no racist there. Okay. So another kind of unwholesome thought, or let us say, in the sense of language, would be, let us call it harsh language, which means calling people names. All right. So in this sense, saying racist, that's one thing. But saying she's a dirty, rotten racist, she is a low-class heathen racist, right? That's kind of harsh speech. And so we refrain from harsh speech. And then the last kind of speech that's mentioned is what is called frivolous speech. Frivolous in the sense that it's got no point, it's got no value, and yet we do that quite a lot. An example of frivolous speech would be introductions, the little rituals, like, hi, I'm really glad to see you, right? Here's an example of what I'm talking about. If this video got cut off before it was finished, and what I mean by before it was finished, that means that we didn't get a chance to say goodbye to one another. It just got cut off. We don't like that, right? You don't like it if the video just gets cut off. We want to get connected again. The reason that we don't like that is because we missed out on those goodbye rituals. And yet those goodbye rituals are actually frivolous. But we're so used to having that kind of frivolous speech that it's kind of okay. It's not, and this is why it's not a very high issue. But if you go, let us say, to a group of people, let us say that you go to a poker game, and there they're talking about politics. And you start talking about politics too. Talking about politics is actually quite frivolous. In fact, it's prone to people getting uptight. Talking about Hollywood stars, that would be frivolous speech. Talking about things that we've got nothing to do with, that's not our business, third parties, and then in fact, almost always frivolous speech winds up being trash talk anyway. Like all those people who are all the stars in Hollywood, they wind up being drunks and alcoholics, right? That's just kind of a frivolous speech. Doesn't mean anything unless we've got something to do with Dhamma, in the sense of stay away from that kind of stuff, because success leads people then to use the money of their success to go harm themselves greatly. And this is why the Hollywood stars wind up being alcoholics, drug users, dying early, and whatnot. But not all of them. There are quite a number of them who live into ripe old age. My favorite one, by the way, is Flip Wilson. Have you ever heard of Flip Wilson? He was a black transvestite that was on CBS national television back in the 60s. He could get away with it. He had this personality called Geraldine, and he'd cross-dress and put a great big wig on, and he was very funny. But when he finished that show, he retired completely and became a family man and lived right into his 90s. He never got caught in that world of looking for more and more out of the name and fame and money that they get. Okay, so not all of the Hollywood stars wind up on Skid Row, but quite a number of them do. Most of them, in fact. You know about the ones who have really died from it, like Marilyn Monroe, Elvis Presley, John Belushi. The list is just huge of people who have actually killed themselves because their name and their fame and their fortune wasn't good enough. They still were unhappy. Now, if we can talk about that in the sense of Dhamma, we're not trash talking, nor are we using frivolous talk, but we're actually pointing out things that people should be aware of so that your name and your fame is not going to be your tragedy. So, if we are talking about everything in the sense of Dhamma, it's actually hard to talk in frivolous terms or to talk in low-class language because everything is Dhamma. If you can see the Dhamma lesson in it, then it's kind of a right speech. Now, Westerners make a big mistake when we talk about harsh speech. They go to the no-no words, okay, the low-class speech. You know, like shit, fuck, hell, turd, bitch, you know, all of those no words. They think that that's harsh speech, but in fact, no. In fact, now that I'm using them and listing alone, look at everybody smiling. Okay, but if I use them in a harsh way, like telling somebody that you're a bitch and you're a goddamn fool and you know all of that kind of language, and you point it out to somebody, that's when it becomes harsh. Okay, so we have to kind of be careful with the language that we use. And like I said, the best thing to do is to have happy language. If you've got happy language, it's really hard to be frivolous. It's really hard to be telling a bunch of lies. It's really hard to be using harsh and frivolous speech and putting people down because it's all in great fun. So if you cannot be in a great, happy, good mood when you're talking to people, the better thing to do is to shut your mouth because you're likely to go off into wrong speech.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Now, one last point about that, and that is that when the mind is noble, and you don't want anything, then you will naturally not involve yourself into deliberate lies, into harsh speech, into malicious gossip, or into frivolous speech. And this is the context, that it's not a matter of a precept that ordinary people have to follow the rules. It's more like that when the mind is noble, we just don't do that kind of stuff.
Yes.
So then when the mind is noble, it's really hard to have harsh speech. It's really hard. I mean, you don't generally do it. You have to come out of your noble mind state in order to have musawada, false speech. Okay. Alex, you got your hand up.
Yeah. I'm not on the screen because like the way the picture is, it hurts my eyes, so I'd rather not be looking at you guys. But I do have a question for you, which is, so very near in time, there's the teachings. So in 400 years, there's three figures that appeared on earth, which are the Lao Tzu, the Buddha, and Jesus, and which have for me very similar teachings. And of course, Taoists don't practice what Lao Tzu taught, Buddhists don't practice what the Buddha taught, and Christians don't practice what Jesus taught. So, and
I
I
would
know
go
that
so
you,
far as to say that is not correct in the sense that the Taoists don't follow what Lao Tzu said. And for
exactly,
sure, the
exactly,
Christians don't follow what Jesus said, and most
exactly.
Buddhists do not
Yeah.
follow what the Buddha said.
But my question is, I know that you understand deeply these three lines of thought, and even so, do you think like there's any superiority in Buddhism? Having you knowing all these three lines, these three different teachings, because in my view they are pretty much the same. They are pretty much the same. What do you think, Dhammarato?
I would say that Jesus was certainly going in the right direction. A lot of the stuff he had to say was noble. I would further say that Lao Tzu, and more than I know of, Chang Tzu, were further along in their understanding and their nobility than Jesus was. But Buddha had actually arrived. So the differences are there that, in fact, if the Christians would follow the teachings of Jesus, it wouldn't be anything like the Christianity that we know today.
Exactly.
And the same thing is true about Lao Tzu. If the Taoists followed actually the teachings of Chang Tzu and Lao Tzu, then Taoism would be completely different than it is now. And
Yeah.
I can also add that if all the little Buddhists followed the actual teachings of the Buddha, there would be no Buddhist religion.
Yeah. Yeah.
It'd just be a bunch of happy people
Exactly.
who don't need a religion.
Okay. And another thing that, like, you were talking about the Christian preacher, but there's another figure. Like, I'm European, so there's another figure in Christianity, which is the reclusive Christian monk that lives in poverty and happy to live a simple life, which is a totally
Have you ever
different.
actually met one?
I did, yeah, I did.
You have, okay. Because they're very, very rare indeed. With all the almost more than a billion Christians on the planet Earth, there are very, very few actual Christians who wind up being happy and contented. Very few indeed of them. I wouldn't say it's absolutely zero because, in fact, you've got somebody that you would contradict me on. But they are definitely rare. And the reason for it is because Christianity doesn't have very much to do with the teachings of Jesus. It's much, much more involved in the point of putting Jesus up in the air, making him special, making him unreachable. That you need Jesus, but you can't find him because he's out of here. And so all they can do is hope and want.
That's not Jesus' teaching. That's not Jesus' teaching. Jesus is always close at hand. He's always near. Okay, but I'm not here.
Most of the preachers are wanting money.
Yeah.
Most of the Christian preachers, especially the televangelists, they want an airplane. They want a bigger airplane than that other televangelist. And if they can't have an airplane, at least they can have the offering plate. And so it's still very much about money. And yet Jesus made the point of render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar and render unto God the things that are God's. Okay? And yet the Christianity, they still want all that money. They haven't been taught correctly. There are a few that understand it. And basically, let us say that a vow of poverty is not going to cut it generally. It takes real wisdom, and sometimes that wisdom will come from taking the vow of poverty. They eventually figure out that, hey, being poor is the easy way to go. You don't have anything, you don't have anything to lose.
Yeah.
But mostly when you have, like, for instance, the Catholic monks, they wound up being, one example would be the Jesuits. The Jesuits are really trained to be politicians. Now, the Trappist monks and the Capuchins are actually better off because they're not in that order. And so they have a better ability to really see what the teachings of Jesus was. But the problem is that the Catholic Church doesn't care anything about what Jesus said. They're much more interested in everybody paying attention to how wonderful the Catholic Church is because they own this Jesus thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So I know a whole lot more about Christianity because I was raised in it. But Taoism, I know there's some really, really good stuff. In fact, the timing is really remarkable. Do you know that Lao Tzu was actually a contemporary of the Buddha?
Yeah, I know that. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
there
do.
was something happened during that time. Some of the most important ones. I mean, this was the age of Socrates. It was the age of Mahavira.
Exactly.
It was the age
Yeah.
of Herodotus. It was the age of the Buddha. It was the age of Lao Tzu, Zoroaster. A lot of very world famous dudes were alive and kicking in that 4th, 5th century BC,
Mm-hmm.
or actually 5th, 6th century BC. I get confused between the 400s and the 5th century. 5th century BC is actually the 400s. So,
Yeah.
And that the number one statement that he starts off with, and the Tao Te Ching, is the Tao that can be said is not the Tao. Now, the Buddha never said that, but wow, is it true? Reality is reality, and you can't define it in words.
Yeah.
If you try to define it, you're limiting it. Then, in fact, that's
Yeah.
what happens with Christianity and their gods and their Jesuses and all of that, is because they've defined them in words rather than leaving them kind of up in the air and undefined. So, anybody else got any questions? Michael, come on, boy.
If we can see the Dhamma in everything and in everyone, you know, we can see everyone as sort of a teacher of the Dhamma in a way, then what is Sangha?
Well, actually, that's a very interesting point. Sangha is the ability to have friends that you can see the Dhamma in them. You can see all of your friends in the Sangha as your teachers. An example of that, by the way, I guess he's not here now. Daniel had asked me a question about, well, what books would I recommend? And one of them was the Sutta Nipata and the Udana. In the Sutta Nipata, there are actually 2 stories about dogs. And the Buddha is using dogs as an example to teach the Dhamma. 2 different examples. The first example was there was a dog that had a place in the dirt where he had carved it out a bit, and he'd lay down in that hole and get cool. And within 10 seconds, a minute, he would be up and he would walk around and walk around and walk around that hole that he had dug, and then he'd lay back down in it, sometimes in the same direction. And then a little while later, he'd get up and he'd walk around and he'd walk around and he'd walk around and then he'd lay back down in his comfortable hole. And when the Buddha saw that dog doing that, he started pointing out to the monks, watch that dog. And there again, the dog gets out of his hole, walks around and walks around and walks around, and then comes back and lays back down in the hole again. Then he gets up and he walks around and then he lays back down in the hole. Now, what's the lesson there? The lesson is that that's exactly what we do. Humans do exactly the same way that the dogs do it. We'll find a comfortable place, but we won't stay there. We'll get up and we'll go all over the place, and then we'll come back and we'll rest. And then we'll get up and we'll go all over the place again in the unwholesome thoughts. And then we'll come back into wholesome place and rest. And then we'll get up again. I want this, I want that. And sometimes humans will go around and around and around in circles for days, weeks, and months before they'll lay back down and rest. So in fact, that dog, at least he would lay back down every minute or two, but humans can spend a half a lifetime and they never lay down and rest. They're out there just traveling around and around in circles, and then if they're lucky, they'll lay down and rest. And if they're really lucky, they'll just stay there like an ordinary dog was. But I like to watch Lucky. She just lays. She's very comfortable. She just lays and lays and lays. She's got an ear open. She's listening. She's a guard dog. But when there's nothing to guard, she's taking it easy. And the other example of the dog was that the Buddha saw this dog that wanted to cross this ravine. And the dog would come up to the ravine, he'd look down, he'd look around, and then he would back off. And then he'd come back and he'd look across and he'd look down and he'd look around and then he'd back off. And finally, that dog took a running, flying leap and jumped across the ravine. Now, what's the story with that? Well, I could see several things. Look before you leap. Get a good handle on what's going on. And then make the jump. Which is exactly what we do in the Eightfold Noble Path. We remember to take a really good look, and then we take the right effort to jump right across that ravine out of those unwholesome thoughts into paradise. So dogs can be teachers of the Dhamma, both negative and positive examples. So you can see that also in the Sangha. You can see both negative and positive examples. And if everybody is in the Sangha doing that, then they're going to grow nobly by helping one another. It's sort of like two guys can cross a tall fence easier than one guy can. Right? Why? Because you can stand on this guy's shoulder and get up to there, and then you can give him a hand and pull him up. So this is what the Sangha is really all about, is helping one another. And I have gotten great joy by having so many friends. And I really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. You've been a good fortune for me. And you can do that with each other. That Daniel and Kat are in Royette, and they're helping each other a lot. But our Sangha group is helping one another also. That somebody will read something and he'll post it on the Sangha group, and somebody will read that and say, wow, that was really great. And then he'll go find something and he'll post that back. Pretty soon you've got a really high quality, noble dialogue going that's completely different than most social media, because most social media are out there trashing one another. They don't have noble right speech. They lie to each other about their attainments. They trash each other. They talk about irrelevant things. But our noble Sangha on Skype and on Dhamma Friends on Discord is much more noble. We're not there to trash one another. We're not there to lie to each other about, look at what I've done, but rather we're really there for the best interest of each other. So that's what it's all about, Michael. And you know the answer to that because you're staying here on the porch. And you know that it's of great, enormous value. And David, you know that it's of great, enormous value for you to be at Wat Khao Thom or to be at Wat Suan Mok and have friends like Pramarut. So, Alex, you got your hand up again. You have a question?
No, no more questions, Dhammarato. No.
Oh, all right.
Okay.
Dhammarato, I have a quick question on what you just said. Basically, I find it very wholesome to sometimes appreciate the Sangha. It really puts me in a wholesome state to meditate. But I was wondering, because I read something about, like, if you go to seclusion, have the effort on just basically removing everything, your thoughts, even things like your sense of identity, I mean, as much as possible in seclusion. So I wonder if those two contradict each other.
Actually, yes, in the sense that now we've got two different training systems. Go off into seclusion, really look at what's happening within the mind. You've heard me say that the book to read is the book between your ears. To look at what you're doing. Then take the right effort to pull that jack out of the box until it gets all oiled and ready to go. And then when you look at that jack, he'll just pop right out of the box for you. Okay, so that's seclusion. And then we go to the Sangha, and one of the things that we can do in Sangha is we can help pull that jack out of that box for each other. So we need both of those things. We need both seclusion and good friends. In order to become a Buddha, you do need the Dhamma that's normally done in seclusion, and you have to have the Sangha of noble friends.
Okay.
It is very difficult to happen on one's own, but it can be much easier when you have Sangha.
Yes.
That's why the Buddha created the noble Bhikkhu Sangha 2,500 years ago, and it's remarkable. It's still going. It's not the oldest tradition in the world because the Jains got that beat. In fact, he was part of the Jains, and they still are in existence. But the Bhikkhu Sangha is the second oldest tradition in the world, and it's by far the largest, and has been for centuries. Where right now, guess what? There are more ordained Buddhist monks and nuns than there on the planet Earth than there are military people, no matter what country they're in. That this country will have like 2 million, and that country over there will have 1 million, and this country over there will have 1 million or so, like that. Guess what? There are more than 7 million ordained Buddhist monks and nuns right now. There are more Buddhist monks and nuns on the planet Earth than there are people in military uniform right now. Isn't that amazing? That's what the Buddha started. That's the Sangha that the Buddha started. And not only that, but when someone has been in the robes for a long time, they're really getting into it. They're happy, joyful, marvelous human beings. And they help each other to be that way. Is that not right, David?
They love each other.
Pardon?
They love each other.
I didn't hear what you said. Michael, can you help me what he said?
He said they love each other.
Mm-hmm. Where Christianity is more competing. My God's better than your God. My Jesus, my plastic Jesus is better than your clay Jesus. My plastic Jesus is actually a squeaky toy, and if you squeeze your clay Jesus, it'll break. You know, this is the kind of competitions that they have. But with the Noble Sangha, we don't compete with each other. We're too busy having fun. So does anybody else have any more questions? Ross, how about you?
Not really a question, but I just like after what Alex said about comparing the Buddha and Jesus and Lao Tzu, I thought like it's quite interesting because where I live, there's a mix of religions. And if you go to the local town, they've got a big town square. And in a lot of town squares, they have statues. So in this town square, there's 5 statues. There's the Virgin Mary, there's Jesus, there's the Buddha, Lao Tzu and Confucius all next to each other. And it represents the belief systems in the local area, which I find quite interesting. But you also just see that, like you said before, they're kind of all practiced in a very similar way that they were by normal people, but very different to maybe how they were actually
My thought
supposed to be
is
taught.
that they need one more statue, and that is actually not a statue, but it's more like a pedestal for a statue, except that the pedestal is empty. It's got nothing there. And that will allow people to go sit on that pedestal from time to time and be a Buddha. But most of the time, it's just empty. There'd be a lesson in there someplace. So do you have a question with that, Ross?
No, I don't have any questions. It came across my mind when I was listening before. No questions, I think. I'm just happy to listen to the answers.
So, last chance. Does anybody have any further questions before we sign off?
Oh, okay. I just want to understand a bit better. Because sometimes I'm not sure if I'm doing it correctly. I think when I practice in seclusion,
That doubt is a hindrance. Let me stop you right there. That doubt, am I doing it right, is a hindrance. That in fact, there's no doubt about it. When you feel good, and you know that you're practicing correctly.
Okay.
And when you have doubts, am I practicing correctly? The answer to that is drop that doubt and just be happy.
Okay, Dhammarato. I understood.
Great. All right. So let me see. Edita. Is that how you say your name? Your microphone is muted. Yeah.
You can listen. You can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Sorry, I can say I can listen. I can listen, but I don't speak very well English. I'm sorry, but I can listen. I understand many things, but sorry for
No problem. I have exactly the other problem with Thai language. I can speak it pretty well, but if the Thai people speak to me, I'm lost.
You don't speak Italy, no? Italian, no? Don't you speak Italian?
No, I don't speak Italian.
Okay.
I don't think that I know any Italian, actually. I know quite a lot of Latin. Kyrie eleison in excelsis Deo.
Oh, yes.
Italian.
Yes.
Uh,
I see many videos for you, but with sottotitle, no? And I listen. I learn English looking at you at your video.
Well, I'm glad to meet you. Glad to see you. Glad that you joined us.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, guys. Well, why don't we finish off now? You got anything to say, Thomas, before we go?
Thank you for this talk. Very gladdening.
Okay. All right, guys. We'll see you again. What a
Thank
nice
you.
group. Yes. Excellent.
Thank you very much.
See you later.
Take care.
Bye. Thank you all.